Introduction. Close your eyes for a moment, even as you listen to this. Notice something. Notice how loud your life actually is. The notifications, the traffic, the conversations replaying in your head, the to-do lists, the arguments you're still having with people who aren't even in the room. We live inside a constant hum of noise, and most of us have never once asked, what would happen if I simply stopped? Not stopped doing, stopped thinking, stopped reacting, stopped filling every single gap of your day with sound, scrolling, and stimulation. Today, we're going to talk about one of the most overlooked, most undervalued, and quite possibly one of the most powerful tools available to any human being, and it costs nothing. It requires no equipment, no subscription, no special talent. It simply requires you to sit down, close your eyes, and be quiet. Sitting in silence. It sounds almost too simple to matter. In a world that worships productivity, achievement, and constant motion, silence can feel like laziness, like wasted time, like doing nothing. But what if I told you that silence is not the absence of action, it is the birthplace of transformation? What if the quietest moments of your day are actually the most powerful? Over the next 20 minutes, we're going to explore why silence matters so deeply, not just for relaxation, but for actually rewiring how your brain works, how your body heals, and how your life unfolds. We'll look at the science of what happens in your nervous system when you finally stop the noise. We'll talk about real people who used silence and stillness to heal from chronic illness, anxiety, and emotional pain that medicine alone couldn't touch. And by the end, you'll understand why some of the most successful, healthy, and at peace people on this planet have one thing in common. They make time, every single day, to sit in silence. So settle in. Maybe close your eyes if you're in a safe place to do so. Let's begin. Part 1. The noise we don't notice. Here's something most people never stop to consider. Your brain has been trained, since childhood, to live in a particular pattern of thought. The same worries, the same self-criticisms, the same predictions about what will go wrong, the same replaying of yesterday's frustrations. Most people aren't actually thinking new thoughts each day. They're thinking the same several thousand thoughts, on repeat, like a song stuck in a loop they don't even realize is playing. This loop isn't just mental, it's physical. Every time you think a familiar thought, your brain fires a familiar pattern of neurons, and your body responds by releasing the same chemicals it released yesterday, and the day before, and the year before that. Over time, your body actually becomes addicted to the emotional state created by those chemicals. You don't just have habits of action, smoking, scrolling, snacking. You have habits of emotion. Anxiety can become a habit. Worry can become a habit. Even sadness, oddly enough, can become a familiar, almost comfortable place to live, simply because it's known. This is one of the central ideas worth sitting with. Your personality, your patterns of thinking, feeling, and acting, literally creates your personal reality. If you keep thinking the same thoughts, feeling the same feelings, and doing the same things, you will keep creating the same life, the same body, and the same future. The definition of insanity, as the old saying goes, is doing the same thing and expecting a different result. Yet most of us live entire decades on autopilot, never questioning the loop. And here's the key insight. You cannot create a new future while you are still emotionally reacting to your past. As long as your nervous system is constantly triggered by old memories and familiar stress patterns, you are, biologically speaking, living in the past, even while standing in the present moment. So how do you break a loop you didn't even know you were in? You interrupt it. And the simplest, most accessible way to interrupt that loop is silence. Part 2. What actually happens when you sit in silence? When you remove external stimulation, no phone, no conversation, no music, no scrolling, something remarkable starts to happen in the brain. The constant outward focus of attention, which neuroscientists associate with high beta brainwave activity, the frantic, analytical, doing mode of the mind begins to slow down. As you sit quietly, eyes closed, breathing slowly, your brainwaves shift from that frantic beta state into alpha, and with enough practice and stillness, even into theta, the same brainwave state associated with deep meditation, hypnosis, and the dreamlike space just before sleep. In this slower state, something fascinating occurs. The analytical mind, the part of you that judges, doubts, overthinks, and resists, begins to step aside. This is significant because that analytical, critical part of the mind is also the part that keeps you locked into old patterns. It's the inner voice that says, "This will never work," or "I've always been this way," or "People like me don't change." When that voice quiets down, even briefly, you gain access to something deeper. The subconscious mind, where the vast majority of your habits, beliefs, and automatic patterns actually live. Think of it this way. Your conscious mind is like the captain of a ship, but the subconscious mind is the engine room, and the engine room is running the show about 95% of the time. Real change doesn't happen by simply telling yourself, consciously, "I will be calmer," or "I will be healthier." Real change happens when you access that deeper engine room and begin to install new instructions. Silence is the doorway to that engine room. This is also why silence has such a powerful effect on the body, not just the mind. When the nervous system is constantly stimulated, it lives in a low-grade version of fight or flight. Stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline circulate more than they should. Digestion suffers. Sleep suffers. Immune function suffers. But in true stillness, the body shifts into what's often called the rest and repair state. Heart rate slows. Blood pressure drops. Digestive and immune systems, which are suppressed during stress, come back online and begin doing their most important work, healing. This is not mysticism. This is basic physiology. The body cannot fully repair itself while it believes it is under threat. And silence, real, intentional, practiced silence, is one of the fastest ways to tell your nervous system, "We are safe now. You can stand down." Part 3. Real stories of healing through stillness. Let's talk about what this looks like in real life, because theory is interesting, but transformation is what actually matters. Consider the story of a woman in her late 30s who, after years of chronic autoimmune symptoms, fatigue, and joint pain, had tried medication after medication with limited relief. Doctors told her the condition was something she would simply have to manage for the rest of her life. Out of sheer desperation, she began a daily practice of sitting in complete silence for 30 minutes each morning. No phone, no agenda, just stillness and slow breathing. At first, her mind would race. Old arguments, old fears. The noise didn't want to stop. But she kept showing up. Within a few months, she noticed her flare-ups becoming less frequent. Within a year, several of her blood markers had improved enough that her doctor was, in her words, stunned. What changed wasn't a new drug. What changed was that her nervous system, for the first time in years, was finally getting consistent windows of true rest, and her body used that rest to repair what stress had been preventing it from repairing. Or consider a man who spent over a decade battling severe anxiety and panic attacks, to the point where he avoided leaving his house for anything beyond what was absolutely necessary. He described his mind as a radio that never turned off. A therapist suggested he begin with just 5 minutes of silence a day, sitting, eyes closed, simply observing his breath without trying to control it. He hated it at first. The silence made the anxious thoughts feel louder before they got quieter. But over weeks, something shifted. He began to notice his thoughts instead of becoming them. He started to recognize the early signs of a spiraling thought before it became a full panic attack. And in that tiny gap of awareness, he found he had a choice he never knew existed. Within a year, his panic attacks had reduced by more than 90%, not because the silence erased his anxiety, but because it gave him back the one thing anxiety had stolen: the space between a trigger and a reaction. And then there are the quieter, less dramatic stories, the ones that may resonate with you most. People who simply say, "I used to wake up in a fog, and now I wake up clear." People who say, "I used to snap at my children, and now I have a pause before I respond." People who say, "I didn't know how exhausted I was until I finally sat still long enough to feel it, and then, slowly, that exhaustion began to lift." What connects every one of these stories is the same underlying mechanism. The nervous system was finally given permission to stop performing and start repairing. And the mind, once quiet, finally had room to notice the patterns that had been running the show all along. Part 4. Silence as rehearsal for a new life. Here is something worth sitting with carefully. Your brain does not fully distinguish between an experience you are having in the external world and an experience you vividly imagine while deeply still and focused. This is why athletes mentally rehearse their performance before stepping onto the field. The brain begins building the same neural pathways through imagined practice as it does through physical practice. This means silence isn't just about calming down. It's an opportunity. In that still, quiet space, free from the distractions of daily life, you have the rare chance to mentally rehearse a different version of yourself. To imagine, in detail, how a calmer, healthier, more grounded version of you would think, feel, and respond to the world. Done consistently, this isn't fantasy. It's practice. You are, quite literally, giving your brain and body a new pattern to begin running, one quiet session at a time. This is part of why so many people describe their daily silent practice not as an escape from their life, but as the place where they actually build their life, long before it shows up on the outside. Part 5. How to begin. You don't need an hour. You don't need a meditation cushion or incense or a special app. You need 5 to 10 minutes, a quiet corner, and a willingness to sit with yourself without immediately reaching for a distraction. Start simply. Sit comfortably. Close your eyes. Let your breath slow down naturally. You don't need to force it. When thoughts come, and they will come, you don't need to fight them or judge yourself for having them. Simply notice them, the way you'd notice clouds passing in the sky, and gently return your attention to the stillness, to your breath, to the quiet itself. Some days will feel peaceful. Other days your mind will feel like a crowded train station. Both are normal. The goal isn't to achieve a perfectly blank mind. The goal is to build the muscle of stepping back from the noise, again and again, until that stepping back becomes second nature even outside of your silent practice. Until you find yourself, in the middle of a stressful meeting or a difficult conversation, naturally able to pause, breathe, and choose your response instead of simply reacting. That pause, that single, quiet gap between stimulus and reaction, may be one of the most valuable things a human being can develop. And it is built, almost exclusively, in silence. Conclusion. We live in a culture that equates worth with output, value with busyness, and rest with laziness. But the truth is quieter and far more powerful than that. The most important changes in your life, physical healing, emotional steadiness, mental clarity, even the rewriting of old, limiting patterns, rarely happen in the noise. They happen in the stillness. Every person we talked about today, the woman whose body finally found room to heal, the man who found space between his anxiety and his reaction, the countless people who simply found themselves a little calmer, a little clearer, a little more themselves. They didn't find transformation by doing more. They found it by stopping, by sitting still, by choosing, even for a few minutes a day, to step out of the noise of the world and into the quiet of their own being. So here is an invitation, not a demand. Tonight, or tomorrow morning, find 5 quiet minutes. No phone, no agenda. Just you, your breath, and the silence. You don't have to believe anything will happen. You simply have to show up and sit still long enough to find out. Because somewhere underneath all that noise, the noise of your thoughts, your schedule, your worries, your habits, there is a version of you that is calm, clear, and whole. Silence won't create that version of you from nothing. It will simply help you remember that they were there all along. Thank you for spending this time in stillness with me today. Until next time, take a breath, find a little quiet, and see what waits for you there.